The Rainbow in Europe by Oz, Rainbow Circle the Roots. In the years 1976-77, a gathering took place in southern Switzerland that brought together numerous people interested in a new way of life. The alternative Swiss and German press publicized this event as the Festival of Monte Verità, referring to the centenary of the founding of the first vegetarian community, which was attended by prominent figures of the culture of that time, such as Hermann Hesse and others. Several thousand people participated in this first happening of the New Age, a festival that was repeated in the following years. At this gathering, free courses, songs, music, dances, and performances were offered, attempting to provide answers to various issues that people were beginning to raise. However, within 3 or 4 years, the festivals ceased. The people who had taken part became involved in small independent projects, each working within their local context, with people they had met at those occasions, and it seemed there was no longer time available for a collective celebration of life. Nevertheless, one summer, in a small mountain village near Monte Verità, a large number of volunteers who shared the work and an alternative communal life gathered together for several months. From this experience, a collective vision emerged among some of the participants to create a large community, and this led them to search for a suitable place where it could be realized. Around the same period, a group of activists from the Swiss alternative press founded the Freestyle University, Università della Stella Libera, which since then coordinated various activities and specific initiatives. However, the decidedly provocative and libertarian impact of the group was not well received by the Swiss government, which issued a series of restrictive prohibitions aimed at curbing and containing this contagious and strongly protest-oriented movement. One particular measure, a ban on large-scale gatherings and camps, was so absolute that it put an abrupt end to any further development in the direction of rainbow meetings. But by then, the first steps had already been taken. Indeed, earlier, during the second meeting at Monte Verità, news had arrived about the tribal gatherings of American families and tribes. On that occasion, a girl appeared in the circle and clearly explained to us the practices and ethics of the rainbow. Her first-hand account confirmed the rumors and reports we had learned about through the alternative press and personal correspondence. We were at once moved and inspired, and the rainbow vision, each of us carried it home in our hearts, to our own house or community. Furthermore, shortly afterward, a meeting took place among European builders of teepees and followers of Native American teachings. This encounter was an exceptional catalyst that greatly strengthened our ideas and conceptions about the rainbow. Toward the first European rainbow gathering. Between 1980 and 1983 there were numerous occasions when we met to live together temporarily in teepees, to organize small festivals, to take part in courses run by the Freestyle University during the full moon equinoxes, and so on. From these repeated gathering moments there arose in some of us the persistent desire to finally organize, in Switzerland, the first European gathering. It was early 1983. We did not have much time available, summer was at the door. The two of us organizers kept in touch by post and telephone. Our experience essentially amounted to having taken part in 2 rainbow gatherings in the States. Beyond that, we had only the baggage of our countless camping trips. We set to work, beginning to deal with all the practical and organizational aspects. Obviously, as could be foreseen, we found ourselves amid a sea of difficulties of various kinds, but the element that seemed insurmountable, and against which we knocked in vain for a long time, was the authorities' flat refusal to grant us the official permit for the event. The situation seemed on the brink of failure when we decided to change strategy. We changed the location of the gathering. Initially an isolated place had been chosen, perched on the top of an alpine mountain mass, not far from the Italian border. The strategy was precisely to move the camp beyond this border, on the Italian side and specifically in Val di Campo. There the Swiss authorities could not intervene and, at the same time, we were protected from the Italian authorities by a mountain chain that prevented them from easy access. We had to walk a good 10 hours through the mountains to reach the village closest to us, or else go 90 kilometers into Swiss territory and then double back toward the place where we were. Thus we built our first communal kitchen, the tipi circle, the latrines, the information tent, and so on. The Swiss customs officers grew suspicious of the movement of people, horses, and donkeys going back and forth across the border, but they soon had to accept that we were doing nothing illegal, and the gathering was able to continue without any further difficulty. A large part of the time we spent together was devoted to preparing spiritual activities such as building sweat lodges, sweat huts, and places for meditation. We also built a stone stove in the riverbed and a small temple that we called the Island of Meditation. We learned to work in council and to listen to one another, to organize ceremonies and rituals, to relate to each other in a circle, and to work together for the joy of spirit and mind. Some of the people who arrived halfway through the gathering then stayed longer than expected, since the place was wonderfully immersed in greenery, an hour from the nearest village, thus prolonging the rainbow spirit among these mountains. Ursula Fleury was one of the first pioneers in Europe of the rainbow gatherings. For some years he has been chiefly involved in establishing a rainbow village with the Bordeaux cooperative near Viganella, Novara. The expansion begins by Paolo Bigatti Bruco. The origin of a turning point. Of the 200 participants in the first rainbow gathering, about 15 met several times during the following year, with the intention of deepening the spiritual bond among them and, at the same time, developing ideas and proposals for the future of the gathering. It was then that our paths crossed, and thus began the logical difficulty of bilingual, trilingual, and even quadrilingual communication within the council. Working intensively on the many aspects of the vision, disagreements were not lacking among the less flexible people. The proposal of the American experience, suggested in cases of organizational impasse, found little success due to the need to establish a common growth on different cultural foundations. We felt ourselves few in number, and as summer approached, our position as organizers became increasingly consolidated, something that later became evident during the course of the gathering, creating a real split between the rainbow hats, those of the chapter, and the other participants. Even if the atmosphere still echoed with the joy of sharing, the structural aspect of the meeting suffered from an excess of Germanic rigor. The fundamental cause of the mutual misunderstanding was the lack of ability to stimulate a sense of participation and cooperation through logistical tasks, which turned out to be a space accomplished by few. This, at least, was the feeling that generated unease among many of the organizers. It was the origin of a turning point, which later manifested itself both in contingent situations and in the foresight of possible future developments. I recall the regret for the inefficiency, and even more for the lack of understanding of the Welcome Center, despite our efforts to make it welcoming, using posters, music, drinks, and warm embraces of greeting. Too dear to me was the memory of the affectionate expansiveness of the American brothers to accept that everyone hurried toward the center of the camp without allowing themselves a moment of familiarization with those who were welcoming them. I had not yet reckoned with the austere emotional behavior of Nordic culture. After all, Mediterranean presence among participants was limited to about 3 to 4%. This was also the stimulus that launched an intentional expansion promoted by Art, the first American brother deeply involved in the history of the European rainbow family, who during the following year, sought contacts in other countries of the continent, aiming for a broader participation, even if the response was somewhat limited. We also discussed reducing the duration of the gathering, to avoid the dissipation of energy observed in the last 15-day experience, and the need for greater organizational scope. The choice for the 85 gathering fell on Italy, a natural alternative so that it would not be repeated in the same place as the previous year, and I, eager to import rainbow energy to my homeland, aiming at cultural rebalancing, took on a good part of the burdens of this experience, from which I drew significant lessons. The rainbow heads south. We had discovered the place 2 years earlier, when together with an American couple, intent on sowing the seed of the rainbow vision on the European continent, we were searching for a site for the first gathering. It turned out to be the same place, without our realizing it, the magic of the rainbow, in a remote border region, the first gathering in Val di Campo. We had already formed an idea, however, by visiting the Apennine area of Tuscany.